which is procedural language extension to SQL. Now, why do we need PLSQL? Basically, SQL is a query language, right? It's not a programming language. It's not a procedural programming. This is an extension created by Oracle. Usually, PLSQL block, that is PLSQL piece of code, is having these sections. Declare is an optional section which begins with keyword declare. You have to declare the variables that you are going to use in your code, like your C function where you declare all the variables at the beginning. Then begin is the block where you actually write your code, like if, else. Usually you write SQL queries in this also. Then you have exception block, which is again an optional thing. What you can see, I declare a variable I of type number. These types will be same as your data types available in your SQL. Then I say begin. So this is my code. I equal to 1. So you can see equal to operator has changed a bit. So it's colon equal to. I colon equal to 1. That means I equal to 1. Loop. This is the statement which is equivalent to your printf in C language. dbm underscore output dot put underscore line. This will print the data onto your Oracle console. So I'm going to print only I, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line I, and then I'm going to increment I equal to I plus 1. Exit when, let's see what happens. So you can see the output as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Now we'll start with our first major component of PLSQL, that is procedures. As you say, procedures are similar to those of your, blocks in C or functions in C, although we also have functions in this. So it's a name block of statement. It may or may not return a value, so that's the difference. So the general structure is, okay, create or replace procedure. It's a syntax. Then you have to specify the name of the procedure, and then you have to specify parameters. Parameters could be of type in or out. In means they will be used for input. Out means they will be used to return the values. So there is no return statement used in procedure, but you can still get the output through out variables. And there is one more possibility of in out. That means variable can be used for input as well as output. If you are not specified in out, then the default is in, right? As or is, both the keywords are allowed. Begin, write the procedure body in here, and then say end procedure name. Let's see one example. If you do not have any parameters, just do not say anything. Otherwise, I'll have to do, this is my query. Select name from student where marks equal to, this is a subquery. Select maximum marks from student and take those marks, maximum marks, as a constraint for marks in the main query and get me the name of the topper. I'm just going to print the name using the dbms line and then gonna end. To execute this procedure, you have two ways. Either you can say exec and name of the procedure followed by parameter list if any, or you can say begin, again the same thing, name of the procedure followed by parameters if any, and then end. Let's try and execute this. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to make some changes because before we do that, I must tell you which are the tables that we are going to use. So I've created this student table. So that looks like this. We have roll number, name, marks, department number, date of admission, fees, and email. And then we have department, create or replace. Let's just type this procedure. Procedure get topper as, I'll say topper name, max marks from student, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line, just topper name. And Okay, so let's just run this. Name is already used by an existing object. Okay, so which name? Get topper student. Okay, procedure created, as we saw, really easy. Now how to run this procedure? Get topper student, begin, then say procedure name, get topper student, no parameters, and then say end. Run this, and you have got the result as John. So let's check out if John was actually the topper. Select. Even if you do not use them, like for example, if you are using select star from student, so you get all the rows in return as output, right? So how do the internals of the database management system handle this? They use implicit cursors. So there are some useful attributes that are provided on these implicit cursors, which we can use in our PLSQL coding. These three are percentage found, percentage not found, and percentage row count. So percentage found is if the query returns something, if the query returns at least one row, then this becomes true, else it returns false. Percentage not found means exactly opposite. If your query does not return any row, then it is true, otherwise it is false. And percentage row count is, you can use this to see how many number of rows have been returned by your query. Okay, then let's make use of this implicit cursor. So as you can see, we have created a new procedure called as updatable, called as var rows, which is number. The body of the procedure is this. First we carry out the query update student says set fees equal to new fee. So basically we increase everybody's fees to new fee. If SQL percentage found, that means this will be true only when this query affects more than one row. Then var rows equal to SQL percentage row count. This will give us how many rows were affected by this query, and we'll just print it, the fees of these many students was updated. Else there's some problem, there is some issue. Alright, let's create this procedure. So procedure created, and let's just run this. See if this actually affected my students. Okay, table name is student, and everyone's fee has become 45,000. So our thing worked, our procedure worked. So this is how you use really the implicit cursors. We are actually using the implicit cursor properties found and row count. Now we talk about explicit cursor. So basically, as I said earlier, you will need them when you are writing a procedure or a function where you require to store multiple rows and iterate through those rows, right? So let's just see the example. So let's just see first the simple cursor basically. So this is a cursor to show the average fees paid by student of each department. So I'll explain the code to you. Declare cursor C1. So this is the general syntax: declare cursor followed by cursor name. It's always is. In case of procedure, this could be is or as, but in case of cursor, it is always is. The query: select department name as department and average fees as average underscore fees from student natural join department group by department name. So this is a query where we are going to find average fees for every department. Then we declare a variable rec1 whose type will be of C1. So rec1 is C1 percentage row type. Rec1 will store row of type C1, and C1 is represented by this query, right? So rec1 will store the row of type C1, C1 percentage row type. Begin. Now iterate C1 using rec1 for rec1 in C1 loop. dbms underscore output dot put underscore line rec1 dot department. Now you can access the columns. We have renamed this column as department, and we have renamed 1000 production 45,000, electrical 45,000. That's true because all our fees have been 45,000 because we just did it in the previous thing. You see the point here. We used a cursor when we wanted to get more than one value. We wanted to get rows. We want to get multiple columns in multiple rows. So we had to write a loop to iterate through each row using cursor. Alright, this is how you use the cursor. Now let's move on. Let's is select the query. You have to specify the query for the cursor. Select distinct department name from department. Then we are taking one more cursor, cursor C2. Now this is a parameterized cursor. So for this we have a parameter called as depth, whose type is varchar. Now this cursor is select name and marks from student natural join department, where department name equal to this parameter department. We say rec1 variable which will be used to show the row of type C1. C1 is this query. It will represent the rows of type this query. Rec2 is C2 percentage row type. That means rec2 will store the rows of type C2. C2 is this query. Then again we start looping for rec1 in C1 loop. When we say inner loop, we put another loop inside the outer loop. For rec2 in C2, now C2 needs a parameter, so we'll use rec1 dot department name as parameter. Loop, we just go point rec2 dot name and rec2 dot marks. End inner loop, then give a what you could say put line, just give a blank line, and then end outer loop. Okay, Hasher 60, production this, electrical this. So we saw department wise list of students using this syntax. So here we used multiple cursors, right? Here we used multiple cursors, and in looping we used nesting of loops. Now let's try to write a procedure with cursor. So this is the procedure which will display details of all students from a given department. Alright. So this is a procedure which will display the list of all the students from a particular department. So department will be passed as parameter depth varchar. Now cursor C1 is, cursor is always is, select roll number, name, marks from student natural join department, where department name equal to the parameter depth. Again rec1 is represents row of type C1. Begin again loop. For rec1 in C1 loop, print rec1 dot roll number, rec1 dot name, and rec1 dot marks. End loop, end. And to execute we have to, we do this. So let's just run this. Procedure created, list students. So say begin list students, pass the department name, let's say civil, and say end. Alright, you can see for civil department there are two students, Usher roll number 6 and marks 90, Bishop roll number 7 marks 80. So this worked pretty well. Now we go to functions. Functions are pretty similar to that of your procedure. The only difference is that functions always return a value, whereas procedure may or may not return a value. If you look at the general syntax for function, then you have to specify is, then you have to specify, this is the query, select sum of fees into total from student natural join department, where department name equal to the depth, the parameter. Again I will explain the syntax. Create or replace function, total fees, name of the function, parameter list, only one parameter, depth of type varchar. This function returns a value of type int, which has to be specified. Then we begin with is, that is the function starts its body. First we define or declare any local variables. So we're going to use one variable total of type int. Finally we begin the code of the function. We write the query return end. So we have created the function. Now in order to execute the function, the syntax is select function name, pass the parameter value from dual. So run this and you'll see total fees as 2,25,000 for production department, which is really cool. Now second function, to get a topper student from a given department. So let's just create that. Create or replace, select get topper name, let's say production. We want to get the topper name from production department from dual. Run. Topper name is John from production department, right? We might want to get the topper from civil department. Topper name is Usher. So let's go to the next example. Triggers. Triggers are stored routines which are automatically stored piece of code which automatically gets executed whenever some specific event occurs for which the trigger was defined. For example, you can write a trigger before some insertion happens or after some insertion occurs, after some delete occurs. So usually trigger can be written for DML like before or after delete, insert, update, or before or after create, alter or drop, or you can also where email equal to the new email that you are trying to insert in the new row. So that means we'll raise some application error using this syntax, raise application error. You have to take error number as any value between minus 20,000 to minus 20,000, 21,000 actually, right? And you have to give some error message, email already registered. Now when you run this, trigger will get created, right? The trigger is check email. Now let's test this trigger. So let's insert. So insert into student values. Now I'll have to give all the values. I'll just give the values which I want to give, right? The name. Okay, I'll give all the values anyway. Null. I'll pass it as null. It's not auto increment right here. Okay, so 34. Then I'll give the name as Jenny. Then I'll say marks as 78, department number 5, date of admission 19 June 2014, fees 56,000, and email champa@gmail.com. Let's run this. And as you can see, the error has been fired. Check email trigger, email already registered. So this clearly worked. Alright then. Now we studied the trigger creation before insert. Now let's study the trigger creation after insert. So the syntax pretty much remains the same. Create or replace trigger, name of the trigger, cancel admit. After insert on student, referencing new as n, karma.com. Pretty unique. Okay, so fees is less than 10,000, less than 10,000. We have kept it to 9,000. Let's run this. See, admission cancelled due to less donation. So trigger is fired and we got the message that admission cancelled due to less donation. So this was after insert. Now we see before update. Before we update a row, we'll give notification. Okay, depth number equal to 6. Let's run this. Deleted. Let's run the join query again and hopefully see there is no student whose department number is 6 now. So those students also got deleted as a result of our trigger, which was after delete. Now we study package. Package is nothing but, you could say, package is a collection of n number of functions or n number of procedures or combination of function, procedure, trigger, cursor. So it's a collection. It's groups logically related PLSQL types, items or subprograms. So package has two things: package specifications, so what it contains, and package body or definition. Let's see it in the example, that will get clear. So if you see package specification, create package name as, you see, if you see this package particularly, okay, so we can change it to student marks as find mark, and we can say it as student ID, where we package like this. This package only contains a procedure, that's it, a simple package. So basically this what you could say, package declaration or of roll number column of student table, and that's about it. So in order to execute this, you have to say exec. So let's run. So simple. Our package name was student underscore marks. Our procedure name was find underscore marks, and that was SID, and our type was student dot roll number. Correct. Now this S marks, and the procedure, that is procedure name is find underscore marks, and end the package, that is student underscore marks. Correct. Now let's just run this. Package body created. Great. Now let's execute this, and to execute, so simple command, marks obtained is 80. So roll number was 12, marks obtained 80. Let's verify. Variables, begin section for okay. So he's asking us for the value of department. Fine. Now what we can do is, so what I have done currently is I've assigned the value of I'm trying to input the value of depth from the user instead of hard coding it. So this is the syntax: depth colon equal to, you can take any variable, value user. If you run this, that value will be required to be passed by user, right? So this is the syntax for that. Now I'll use this value in my query, select department name into name from department, where department number equal to depth. Then I'm going to print dbms underscore output dot put line, whatever the name is. Now exception when no data found. So system will raise the exception if no data is found. That department number that we have provided, if there is no row corresponding to that, then there will be no data. So automatically system will raise the exception no data found. So we are handling the system defined exception now, whose name is no data found. Exception when no data found, handle the generic exceptions, right? So basically you might be having a hard time understanding what is this no data found. It's the name of the system. Simple. In this case we'll have to define the exception. So if you look at this PLSQL block, declare, we are declared two variables here, department, depth and name. As you can see, depth's type is same as type of department number column from department table, and name variables type is same as department name column of the department table. We have also declared a exception. Now we are trying to create a user defined exception. So we have declared a new exception. This is the name of my user defined exception. I have to declare it. Begin. If department less or equal to 0, then raise x invalid department number. So I'll just get the value of department first. Det colon equal to colon user value. Right? I'll get the value from user first. If that value is less or equal to 0, it is negative, then raise fire or raise x invalid department number exception, which I have declared earlier. Else, select dep name into name from department where department number equal to dept, and then just print the department's name. And if exception we have to handle now when x invalid department number, see the exception which we are throwing here, we are handling here, then just print department number must be greater than 0. When no data found, this is system raised exception. We have seen this earlier. No such department. When others is a generic exceptions, you just handle it with some message error. Let's run this. So let's run this now. So we are getting some value. So let's say minus 12, submit. And okay, there's some error out here. Okay, let's run now. So let's give the value as Samuel equal to minus 12. We are given the value as Samuel minus 12. Submit. And as a result of which department number must be greater than 0. Let's give a normal value. Let's say 3. Submit. We should get the proper value of department name. Department electrical. And then let's have a value which is valid, but there is no department by that name. 56. No such department. Great. So all the 3 exception blocks were covered. Fine then. This is how you create the user defined